The test of all tests is how energized are you on a daily basis? If you are not in alignment with your purpose, with your soul, with your true self, that energy is going to be something very inconsistent. A lot of people are getting stuck, especially in the spiritual field. It's kind of like an obsession with going through the healing or relating to the pain body, and sometimes even glamorizing that part of the spiritual journey, which can keep somebody in victim consciousness and slow down the ignition of their true purpose. You can't wait for permission anymore from anybody else. You can't wait for people to apologize that inflicted the pain, for instance. You can't hope for partners to change that aren't in alignment with, let's say, your soul purpose. And you can't wait for anybody to do this work for you. So it requires taking responsibility and really sitting with sometimes the most complex emotions that when you fully allow them to work through you, they create a whole new identity structure. All of us are activating nodes in this collective grid. We all need to remember that this is part of our vital purpose, to know that our own awakening is inevitably going to lead to others' awakening.
What if everything you have ever done to heal yourself has actually been the very thing keeping you trapped? Gabi Kovalenko is an intuitive energy worker, quantum philosopher, and author of Falling Up, and she has spent her life decoding why intelligent, self-aware people stay stuck in the same loops, no matter how much work they do on themselves. What she's going to share today is not a framework or a 5-step process. It is a remembrance of an intelligence that already lives inside you. And we are going to explore the healing trap, coherence, feminine energy, karmic patterns, and why this moment in history is one of the most awakened women on the planet cannot afford to ignore. So by the end of this conversation, something in you is going to shift. Not because I am telling you it will, but because truth has a way of landing in the body before the mind has even caught up. So stay with us. This one is for your soul. Enjoy. Well, hello, beautiful souls. We have another, and I mean another amazing guest. We have the beautiful Gabi Kovalenko. Nearly did it again, Kovalenko.
You got it.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for allowing this space to be immersed in your beautiful energy. So the way that we always start the show is we always love to ask our guests, what inspired you to do what you do today?
Yeah, that's such an interesting loaded question, because for me, it feels like the inspiration isn't something I ever mentally came up with. And it's actually more of an inevitability that I chose this path. And it feels more like something that I couldn't escape. Like all of my deep questions, my curiosity to explore the deeper nature of life and human nature and how can we optimize ourselves as souls in the physical realm put me on this path naturally. And I started super early on. I started actually first writing articles about all these different conscious themes like intuition and self-awareness, and trying to understand the big questions in life and answer them from a really innocent place of just observing some of these energetic nuances and writing them from that free-spirited energy inside myself. And that put me in a space where I started to feel there's a deeper intuition that's calling to attention everything that wants to come through me, and certain things that I could answer without even having the experience or the kind of lived wisdom to attribute to those areas. And so I found myself like putting this out there very naturally because my soul was guiding me in that direction. And it's always been a real passion of mine to, of course, help people. I first thought that it would be through traditional medicine. I always wanted to be a doctor and to help people heal, but I became, of course, disappointed once growing up and learning all about traditional medicine and big pharma, that there's a lot more holistic solutions involving subtle energy and the deeper root cause of healing, which came much more naturally and holistically to and through me. And that's what guided me to do what I do now.
So for those that actually don't know what you do, would you like to maybe unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to put myself in any one box. And that's actually the thing that I teach people to do, is to live from the heart and think outside the box. So I'm really kind of a new philosopher. integrating principles of quantum physics and natural medicine and a really holistic worldview that allows people to see themselves through a higher vantage point and to find a way to heal by connecting to their soul. And so my work is deeply intuitive. I consider myself an energy worker and kind of a mystic in my way of connecting dots through claircognizance, or a deep way of entangling with people's fields and coming up with the answers that often their subconscious is holding, but that they don't know that they don't know. So I find it as the work of finding those blind spots and allowing people to see the big picture from there. So I'm kind of like a midwife in the process of helping people to expand their awareness and connecting usually the problem areas to what they naturally hold inside them that offers that code of deeper spiritual awareness.
That's amazing. Can I just say too, I am blown away by the information that you are able to share with us without, like you were saying, it's almost like, because you're very young, and I've watched your videos and I'm like, wow, you can see it's almost like coming, it's a download. You're really aligned with source or God or whatever that is for you. But I am blown away by the information that comes through you, because it flows through you. So
Thank you.
I'd love to understand when did that start for you? Because you, like you even said, when you were writing articles, it was just kind of articles that you were, and there was this real playfulness about you, this innocence, yeah, because it was more
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I never even thought that I'd be doing the work that I'm currently doing, and that it never was an intention to be a spiritual teacher or a thought leader of sorts. It more flowed from a place of not getting in the way of this energy and consciousness that's trying to come through me. And so I have a very pure intention behind what I do. And it's connected to this primordial principle that all people have access to. And that's that we are whole when we enter this world. You know, we all have this innocent, beautiful inner child and pure essence that's a fractal of source consciousness or God that lives within us. So I feel like I definitely preserve that inside myself. And through that, I naturally connect with that inner essence in all people. And I help to bring them into that recognition that they need to restore the sacred relationship to that within themselves to feel like they're in a unitive model of reality. And so I found myself naturally coming out of the misalignment, I could say. Instead of unprogramming myself, I more was removing all the obstructions like fear, like different biases that I was actually first placing in my own mind about, for instance, being too young to do this work. Or even before I had the download that came to me to write my book, I also felt maybe I need to still pick up some more wisdom and experience before I kind of qualify to do this on this more professional level. But every time I felt that distinction inside myself, when there's energy and wisdom and knowing that's trying to come through, and then the human part of me or the ego that's saying, well, actually put the brakes on. You need something more lived and linear to relate to in order to qualify for that. I realized that's actually the disillusionment. That's the human myth about needing even more linear time and more of that experience or mistakes, whatever it is, in order to qualify to share pure wisdom. So it's coming from the heart. And that's why when I even try to think it through ahead of time, that's usually when I slow down. And that's why I can't make a script for a video. I never use a teleprompter or anything like that, because that creates actually more of an obstruction. And I know it's kind of an interesting thing for people to observe, because I often hear, like, am I AI, or am I using a script, or am I taking notes ahead of time? As that's usually the thing that people can't wrap around their heads, how you could flow more quickly and easily when you're actually removed from the need to plan ahead of time or to have something, already guiding you from the mental place. I actually believe everything comes from that deep embodiment.
That's amazing. But how do you stay in that? So, because I know for me, I've watched you and I'm in awe. But the other thing too, I always think like, this is an illusion. I am not the body. And all the things outside of me is just an illusion. It's actually an effect of my cause. But how do we stay in that state that you talk about, like in like in the heart, when you get pulled out and like, the ego's trick, it is very tricky. Like, like you said, it's in there all the time. I mean, do you have enough credentials, Catherine? Do you have enough experience to speak about this topic? How do you stay in alignment? And what does that actually mean to be aligned?
The term that I use most often, and I found myself really downloading the need for this this kind of energetic relationship and major theme is coherence. And I find that to be the most accurate term because it goes beyond even frequency, like raising your frequency, or beyond even trying to align in any one dimension of consciousness, because there's so many dimensions. And if you're aligned in any one of them, but not more, or all of them ideally at the same time, you're not going to be able to hold that alignment. And so what a lot of people are doing that creates a struggle that I often see is they're trying to align only, let's say, physically or only mentally, trying to just change the mindset or the beliefs or the identity structure, or they're setting the right physical goals, let's say, and disciplining themselves to work out in the gym or to do something to achieve a certain desired, even biological set point, involving heart rate coherence or something like that. But that might not take into account every other aspect of their conscious experience, which relates the emotional and the spiritual and the psychosomatic aspects. And I fundamentally believe that if you exclude any of those layers of your experience, you end up paying the price through everything that you then subconsciously manifest to bring attention to what isn't in coherence. First of all, in your worldview, in your lived experience, and then, of course, it relates to what you're holding inside yourself. So that's what's really important to think about. And that's usually where people get triggered because it requires shattering the attachment to the things that you think you want to even attract and manifest and look at, and go into the areas that are most triggering and most difficult to assimilate. And also to look at yourself from kind of a third-party perspective, which definitely takes some work doing, to disconnect from the way that your mind typically perceives you. And I find that that holds so much sacred information about the distinction between your own self-relationship and self-perception and really what you can have access to as your higher state of potentiality if you start to look at yourself cohesively. Meaning you look at not just yourself through what you were taught to believe about your abilities, your intellect, your beauty, whatever it is that you relate to on the level of the identity structure and those beliefs. But you start to consider more everything you have access to as an energetic being and everything else that you can allow to flow through you if you start to focus not on changing the beliefs, but allowing in the healing that moves you from the obstruction and the criticism, the self-judgment, the self-denial, pushing yourself to do things you don't necessarily even feel in alignment with, to moving into more feeling what are your strengths and gifts, and how does that innate intelligence within the being want to flow through you to create alignment. And so that's how a kind of organic healing and harmonization happens across all these bodies of consciousness. And it's a really beautiful thing to observe because a lot of people think they need to create a path consciously and sometimes find it very difficult to figure out what do they need to heal or when does the healing journey even end to start to really live and to thrive in life. But I think we don't need to keep ourselves in the healing loop and scrutinizing ourselves, but more need to look at how has all of that lived experience and everything you hold inside you naturally actually cooperate to create the desired plan. And then to take another layer deeper and higher is the soul manufactured all of these circumstances to bring you the highest vantage point. And you need to allow yourself to operate with all these aspects of you and with the universe at large to create a new kind of structure behind your experience. And that's where that feminine energy comes in. That's where there's that sacred flow and the ability to really connect the dots and to not reject any aspects that feel unwanted. Because the rejection energy, as we all know, only leads to repetitive loops and kind of life needing to show you the hard way everything that you've been avoiding or rejecting. And so this to me also represents a massive shift. It's kind of like a bifurcation point collectively right now between the Newtonian model of physics and science, everything that's very deterministic, cause and effect based, linear. It's part of the trap that people feel, especially if they're super mental and reductionistic in their thinking, to a shift into more of a quantum probabilistic universe, which I'm so happy to see that more and more science is coming out with this incredible proof of what it means to really live in cooperation with reality, because that's what this quantum field is all about. Everything is a sea of possibilities, and we are intimately connected to that through our awareness, through what we observe, what we feel. And that's what also I mean about choosing to relate more to all these aspects of you to stay in alignment. You need to first observe the full truth about yourself as much as possible and seek to know what do you not know, what do you not see, to challenge your own convictions, and to see also how I think a lot of the systems are built on these flawed principles, or let's say limiting constructs, including education and history and mainstream medicine. All these fields are built on the same kind of Newtonian model. But if we bring in the higher vantage point, we can start to disprove that consciously and then bring in so many more variations of what it means to coexist in this field and to create true well-being for ourselves.
So much has bubbled up for me right now. I was just thinking, so you're saying that literally there is no fixing, there is no work to be done, there is no shadow work. It's more of igniting and illuminating the things, like you said, the gifts and the strengths within us that will dissipate and dissolve the shadow or the dark bits. That's how I kind of interpreted what you just said. Is that correct?
That's the stage of culmination. What you're talking about is if you were to look at the entire alchemical journey, for instance, and you get to the final point where you peak from the experience of going into the darkness, dissolving all of those things that hinder spiritual evolution and awakening. And eventually you hit that point of transcendence where you realize all of that was part of the illusion. It was part of the construct, but it was also a necessary part of what needed to be experienced to forge the soul's potential and that strength. So that's all necessary. The shadow work is built into the process of first needing to look into the eyes of the pain body and the trauma and really understand your roots, where you come from, including the collective pain body. There's a lot of really dark layers, but I feel it's really important to not stay lodged in those layers and to stagnate, which is where I see a lot of people are getting stuck, especially in the spiritual field. It's kind of like an obsession with going through the healing or relating to the pain body, and sometimes even glamorizing that part of the spiritual journey, which can keep somebody in victim consciousness and slow down the ignition of their true purpose. So you need to have both, but ultimately you kind of become that wave and move from one state to the other, where you realize all of that was just the activating node in a much larger process of that awakening and co-creation in reality.
Yeah, because I mean, the way that I always see it is there is always a dichotomy, but that we've been conditioned to believe there's always going to be a dichotomy. There's good and bad and right and wrong, and really it's about how do we integrate those parts so they can become whole. What you did talk about though was about the feminine energy. And I hear this quite often about reclaiming the feminine and why it's so important now. I'd love to sort of like deep dive into that as a little bit more, because you just mentioned it as well.
Yeah, it's another world of experience and really a sacred dimension of the human condition, which I feel right now we're at that point collectively where it needs to be reclaimed, or else we're going to deal with even more destruction, which is already unfolding, of course. But people don't usually equate that to an imbalance with our relationship to the feminine energy. And it always looks destructive on the surface if it isn't integrated, which applies to both genders, the interpersonal, the intrapersonal, the collective experience, as that feminine part is really the integrative principle. It's what allows for the deep feeling, for the synthesis of everything that the feeling allows you to understand more deeply. And it ultimately brings into focus the need for healing. So when people are avoidant, when they're trapping this energy or they're stagnating, or the karmic loops are something that's infiltrating their life and keeping them in the same mode over and over again, that's typically because they're not integrating that seed of feminine wisdom, which can be unraveled. If you really look into why did that happen, any experience, anything that's stored within the self, what's the deeper cause for why that experience is there? And typically it can't be explained by the mind at all, because you can come up with so many different beliefs and logical explanations for why something should have happened or shouldn't have happened. And that's where you stay in a mode of polarization, confusion, and really feeling like everything that's happened is in some way a projection of other people's reality. But in that too, we come back to that quantum perspective where if this is all within your own vantage point, your universe, all these people bringing you certain experiences are beings that you are entangling with consciously, then when you hold that kind of polarized energy within you, it means you're not going deep enough into the heart of what your feminine aspect wants you to explore there, what it is that they can bring to you now as you choose to metabolize whatever pain or even challenging experience could allow you to feel, which is usually comes down to a heart opening and to an understanding of how to be grateful for even the darkest of times and people that allow you to learn, for instance, boundary setting, reclaiming your identity, choosing to really adopt a more autonomous way of relating to reality where you don't necessarily even need people to change to feel like you have that freedom to embody your best self. And that's the part that's very triggering for people to usually integrate because it causes you to feel that you can't wait for permission anymore from anybody else. You can't wait for people to apologize that inflicted the pain, for instance. You can't hope for partners to change that aren't in alignment with, let's say, your soul purpose. And you can't wait for anybody to do this work for you. So it requires taking responsibility and really sitting with sometimes the most complex emotions that when you fully allow them to work through you, they create a whole new identity structure. And that's one in which the masculine and feminine energies can cooperate, which is really what we need most in this world, right? It's where we can live in a way of symbiosis, where we care, we are compassionate, we're deeply empathic, but we're also building and creating nurturing structures for the world and ourselves at the same time. So it's that symbiosis which also takes even those empaths that are deeply disempowered at this time into a whole new octave experience, where they're no longer dwelling in, again, the pain body, but they're feeling like even those feminine emotions are meant to inspire a more loving approach to the self and to others. And that's what I feel births the service to self and others connection instead of the dichotomy that often creates this pain and friction in our reality.
I love that. I'm having a bit of a smirk right now because I'm also, and it's also conditional depending on your environment. So, growing up, in a very, my parents, immigrated from France, and I was always the mother archetype in the family. I looked after everyone, left at a very young age, and then worked into a corporate world. So I had this belief that I actually had to show up and always be doing rather than receiving, which is very much the feminine energy. But
Yeah.
interesting now that I'm actually, well, I'm a fire horse. So this is stepping into a fire year. It's amazing how I've stepped into this year and talked about boundaries and having those difficult conversations and have more empathy towards me, not just always to others. So I feel like I wonder if that's also been, I think it's a cosmic dance between what we're experiencing and, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, I don't know whether you have any beliefs around stepping into the fire horse. What does that mean for us as a woman, too, energetically? Because I go to a Chinese practitioner. She does all my acupuncture. And she said to me, being a fire horse, she said back in her day, they used to kill women at birth as a fire horse because they're too strong-headed. Yeah, so she used to always say, and then stepping into this year, she said, be very careful, be very careful. So I'd love to hear what you've got to say about the fire horse.
That's incredible. Both of my parents are fire horses too. So I wouldn't be born if that horrible practice would still be a thing. And that's an amazing thing to call to attention because definitely this archetype and your archetype is something profoundly catalytic. Probably there was already at the time that that practice became a tradition, most likely it was already birthed in the collective consciousness that that fiery feminine energy is something threatening, something that poses a risk, maybe even a systemic risk, because the energy that comes through that is so cathartic that I think it raises the uncomfortable questions and it calls to attention everything that needs to be transmuted for there to be energetic justice play out. And I'm really glad you mentioned women as being part of that awakening, because that's directly what the rise of the feminine represents. And I feel at this fiery year, this is like a juncture point for a lot of women that have been dwelling, stagnating, feeling victimized, suppressed internally, to reclaim their power and to go through this internal moment where they sense everything that's been fragmented, wounded, diseased inside themselves. And they just make a new kind of agreement to not allow that fragmentation to be their reality, which can really lead to this quantum shift in awareness. And I think it can happen very quickly because there's a lot of astrological events, as you probably know this year, like the Saturn and Neptune energies moving into Aries. And I feel like a lot of people are going to have a point where they realize enough waiting, enough, outsourcing anything, validation, truth, or the need to receive permission from anybody else and to really choose to step into this sacred alignment internally, which is something that you have felt probably for a very long time. So in this year, I think a lot of people will feel like there is some kind of spontaneous awakening of true knowing that's coming through, and it just can't be denied anymore. That involves knowing about the purpose, if there's been procrastination on one's true spiritual mission in life, or what somebody feels they need to do to create alignment in their relationships, in their internal obligations, to heal themselves, to really create that containment for inner peace to come through, or to summon any other new energies like creative potential, like abilities that might have been left behind even in childhood, or things that are, deeply passionate for the individual that they might have not been creating the time and space for. I think all of that will start to feel like a priority because the fiery energy, it summons the need to take action on what ignites you at that very raw, visceral level. It's the energy of authentic truth that's coming to light, and you can't escape it. It's sort of like what I mentioned, me feeling about my own purpose. It just at a certain point, you feel like you can't not align with that, especially when the energy pushes you so hard in that direction. So I'd say it's a really good even practice for people to step into and embody this year, is to feel what is coming up most intensely inside of them, including something they feel they want to do, or they have already had the intention to do time and time again, but they've been putting on the back burner because they thought maybe it's not the right time, or maybe the universe needs to give them the invitation to choose that as the ultimate conviction they make between themselves and their own souls. But the time is now. And if you're feeling the energy so strongly, it means you just need to create this internal agency and go for it. And to see what also shapes in the personality, in the new belief system, if you allow yourself to yield to the energetic current that's now going to be prevailing. And that already creates the realignment. So to your other question too about how to maintain the alignment, it's about maintaining radical honesty. That's what I deeply believe. You need to know if you are lying to yourself on some level, if you're splitting from what it is that you really feel and you really know about yourself, especially in those moments where you're in silence, you're alone. It's the end of the day, you're falling asleep, or maybe you can't fall asleep. And then insomnia also could, as one example, show the split between the conscious and subconscious domains. So in all these moments, you get the most sacred information about where you're not totally choosing yourself and allowing that alignment to be your pervasive reality. So it's important to look at all of that as the moments where you are intimate with your own feminine nature. And that feminine is born usually in the darkness, in the space between the notes and the words and even the thought process.
I'm agreeing with you. I would just say there's a letting go of stop resisting of what is, and I think that there's and that's what I've learned to do to become a little bit more aligned, is to be more conscious in the present moment. It's not always easy. It's a practice. I'm not saying that I have perfected it, but living consciously for me, it's especially being in the type of environment that I'm in. It's always I can be really good in the mornings. I have my morning routine and I can be really consciously and present. But then as soon as I'm in front of this, it's like the fire horse is activated within me and it's go, 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 go. So it's learning about also, I think too, that the fire, it's a big fire year. Obviously, you talk about Neptune and Saturn moving into a fire element. And the fire element, it has to be also, it's to me, there's a sense of freedom and spirit going through you. And there's this real beautiful divine integration that takes place. But at the same time, it's about how do we contain that fire too, that we are making sure that we are consciously stepping into it and not allowing these old patterns of subconscious or unconscious patterns to run the show. How do you practice staying living consciously?
Well, playing with the fire consciously is a really good test. If you feel into this life force energy inside yourself, that's ultimately the crux of the matter. That's this chi, prana, that vital force inside the field, which needs to be circulating fluidly and cohesively to create that sense of alignment. And that feels like a vital quality, literally vitality, when you're glowing, when you feel radiant, when there's a desire to wake up in the morning and jump out of bed and there's ideas flowing and passion and inspiration and love, most importantly, for the self and others at the same time. So if the vital quality is missing, it's important to feel into what's causing the removal of the vitalism. Is something stealing it that is a conscious choice that's being made, or maybe a subconscious agreement that hasn't been collapsed yet? That could still mean these past patterns that are unconsciously playing out. It could mean you're loyal to even generational trauma or past versions of yourself. that perhaps weren't fully integrated into a new model of the self that can allow for new choices to be made within that internal alignment. So it's important to feel into what is not allowing for there to be a conscious agreement on all these parts of reality. And then to feel that, can you even trust your own power and using this fiery energy for good and for balance? It's interesting, but I've seen a lot of people, they're deeply afraid of their relationship to the fire because they don't know how to use it. And there's even a deep philosophical question around it too. Like, is it always a benevolent thing to play with the internal power or the fire? Or is it something that we need to shield ourselves from? Because a lot of people actually don't trust themselves to experience the infinite energy of abundance and the absolute that they are also a living fractal of. And in that, there's a lot of other limiting beliefs that can come up. It's a really deep matter, but it really comes down to the question of, can we trust ourselves to be complete, to choose wholeness, and to trust that we will be able to live intentionally and also morally and ethically when we're in alignment with that kind of power? A lot of people, obviously, they choose the temptation, or they open up to their power and they feel like there is a greedy intention that comes up, or they want to exploit that power, or they're still trying to prove their power to somebody else that, let's say, didn't allow them to feel powerful in the past. And so the relationship to power can be a very tricky thing to navigate, because if you're not really aware of your innermost intentions, it can be something that burns you. And that's why I said it's really like playing with fire. You can get scorched by your own fire, or you could learn to, get through burnout or through just becoming extremely, in a nervous system way, overactivated. Realize that you're not using your fire in a way that allows you to feel stable and also disciplined with how much you're giving and receiving at the same time. And so it's important to check ourselves on the energetic plane and make sure that we actually feel that balance consistently, which involves our sleep rhythm and how good we feel on a daily basis consistently in our energy levels. And something I often tell people is simply that the test of all tests is, how energized are you on a daily basis? If you are not in alignment with your purpose, with your soul, with your true self, that energy is going to be something very inconsistent. You might feel like you ebb and flow, you're all over the place, or maybe you're learning to stop self-abandoning and to choose internal consistency, which can cause you to need a lot more sleep, for instance, or to feel withdrawn from the world. And that's totally okay. But that's part of learning a new rhythm of self-trust, so that you can choose all the factors in life that allow you to stay in alignment with that fire and to trust that it's really the birthplace of that creation force, not just for reproduction, but it's the sexual and creative energy that allows all things to be born and for emotional balance to be present. So that's another thing too about the feminine energy, is that a lot of people are scared of it because it feels like this extreme fire, and it's very demanding if you're feeling it for the first time, because you can't suppress it, you can't contain it. You have to learn to first trust it completely and allow yourself to hold all the emotions, until there's this kind of aspect of it where, when you witness the entire continuum of the feminine spectrum and you let yourself feel all the emotions in the world, at a certain point, peace starts to set in. And you won't feel angry all the time or grief all the time. You just start to make peace with your ability to feel all of it. And through that embodiment, there is like a simmering, like a slowing down into the self. And that pendulum stops swinging violently when you start to hold space for the feminine nature. And that's often the same as people's inner child relationship, or how it feels to first contact the higher self frequency, which could feel chaotic if you're not used to feeling your own truth. And if you don't embody authenticity consistently, it can feel like so much to witness for the first time. But the more you feel it and witness it and feel like you're holding hands with these parts of yourself, the more it feels like there's no need to be swinging or even choosing in all these different directions, but rather everything's made from that integral point of inner devotion and self-trust.
I love that. And for me, as you were speaking through about the fire element, I just got a bit of a flashback of, I used to always write in little journals back in the day. So I'm a lot older than you, obviously, but probably the same age as your parents. But we used to have a little diary or a little journal with a key. And I used to write in them all the time because I felt this sense of freedom to be able to write without the judgment, without the resistance. And I collected them. And then one day, I remember looking back at my diaries and go, I can't relate to that, Catherine, anymore. And I burnt them all. I created this beautiful fire, and I watched this fire absorb all of these journals over years of writing. And purely because it was like I was making a statement to myself that this is me stepping into a different me, a shifting identity. Because I think we're always shifting identity. I think we're always evolving and expanding. I mean, that's what we've come here to do. I think, anyway, as a soul, right, we've come here to experience and expand. So I love where you spoke about the feminine energy. How do we allow that? Because I think, look, when you talk about the emotions, and this is just from my experience, of course, I find sometimes, Gabby, that people can't even articulate their emotions because they've repressed them for such a long time. I've got an academy, a positive psychology coaching academy, and because they find it really hard to articulate, we have this thing called the feeling wheel. So they can actually point, this is what I'm actually feeling, because there's a lot of conditioning that's taken place over the years about what are our feelings. So when you're talking about containing all of those emotions, I've almost like human combustion just came to mind. It was just, you would just explode. So how does one hold that container?
Hmm. Yeah, I've probably posted that emotion wheel at some point because it's a wonderful tool for people to really start to track intentionally and to learn that all of these emotions have a place, not just in the inner world, but in consciousness, that they exist for a reason. There's a lot of different dimensions to them. It's never a, one directional thing. There's a precursor to even that emotion, and sometimes different emotions that are encoded in that relate to the larger picture. And so I would say it's important to start to not try to displace whatever emotion's coming up first and foremost, and to just allow it to be something that you seek to understand more via self-empathy and learning to associate with what is, which is literally the definition of integration and love at the same time. Like love is the embodiment of this force that desires to bring separate forces together, including even awareness and the emotional quality. So what you're talking about is that fragmentation where people that are deeply wounded, they choose to dissociate from their emotions because they just didn't feel anybody ever hold space for them. And they feel it's a distraction, or they feel it's too vulnerable. And usually there's a particular belief around what those emotions represent, which would lead to the crumbling of those egoic defenses. And so it's important for them to feel, why have they created, first of all, a veil in between this sacred emotional domain, which is storing the truth of who they really are, what they've always felt from a purely innocent place of embodiment and knowing, whether it's picking up on energetic inconsistencies, picking up on lies in the field, on frequencies that are really interference patterns that can create a threat for the self, but learning to view that as intentional and intelligent information, which allows them to understand their environment and themselves more. So that's like step one, feeling that the feelings are the gold of our experience. And they're always true, but sometimes they are polarized to the degree that we can't sense the truth in them because our relationship to the feelings is what is wounded. And so to start to understand, okay, where's that emotion coming from? Where's it stored inside the body? Does it live in a particular chakra or an organ? What does it feel like? It's not just a static condition. It's never inert. It's always living and moving and pulsating. Like that anger can live inside the liver. It can lead to a kind of heat that moves through the body. And it shows you exactly where the emotion wants to direct a kind of intentional action. So it's literally showing a pathway of conscious expression that would allow you to come out of the trapped emotional or frozen state where the fascia is literally storing that and you're feeling like the emotion is controlling you, versus you feeling like you can bridge your awareness to that emotional experience and find a way to guide it into a place of equilibrium. So you can start to move that anger, for instance, into the awareness that you wanted to be creative at some point. And because you were denied access to that experience in a safe way, you trapped it, thereby trapping your inherent nature. And so now you can untrap that, so to speak, by seeing where's that energy actually showing, what perhaps your heart wants, and what you're storing in your sacral chakra, what your sexual, creative, dynamic life force wants you to express to feel your whole humanness explored in a way that's multidimensional. And in there, you might find a whole new relationship to yourself is born. And that anger might turn into something very exciting to work with, like the fuel for evolution and a kind of intrinsic motivation to see how the anger inside you is also maybe something deeply karmic and generational, which could heal a part of the entire lineage that might have been denied that same experience of creativity and feminine integration. And that's something that's mind-blowing to track, that really the deprivation of feminine integration is a universal theme. It shows up in every culture, in practically everybody's bloodline and their lineage, down to the genetic level and mitochondrial level. So it's something that we need to look at as really a non-negotiable part of our experience, that almost everyone's dealt with the survival mode, and of course the ancestral trauma that is about the splits that cause us to be divorced from our feelings because we just needed to embody that at some point to survive on a collective level. But now this is the choice that we need to make, to see the pattern, to understand it viscerally, and now to make the choices that allow us to heal everything that has once collapsed our field and caused us to suffer, and to move into some form of expansion that feels real and that ignites our true self. And so that's how I think we move from the combustion state to realizing, okay, something specific wants to move. And when you allow yourself to move in that direction, you start to feel immediately a kind of peace and coherence unfolding in the way where your heart feels respected. And you start to feel like you're moving in unison with all of these elements inside you that are literally just seeking to create a higher level conscious solution through you.
I love that. As you're speaking about it, I'm just thinking, so there's this real embodiment about us connecting at an emotional level as where is this energy residing within our, and this is the other thing too, and I want to say within our body, but it's like then that's keeping us trapped in the physical illusion of the body, right? Where you're talking more about the levels of consciousness of where we are tapping into this, whether it's, you know, sitting in the liver or wherever that may be. Because I know also with a lot of the Chinese medicine, because I see, as I alluded to, they will let you know when, you know, they'll give you the herbs to add more water into the system, or, you know, you've got too much fire in your belly or whatever that may be. So there's this real, because the practice that I'm doing at the moment in the mornings is about letting go of the physical body, because the physical body is only illusion, it's not real. And so when I'm doing these practice meditation about, you know, you are Christ consciousness and there is no physical body, you are no form, you are nothing, you are all that is, or nothing at all. And it's about letting go of all the knowing, is what you were alluding to before. It's about unforgetting. No, forget, yeah, because that's what I'm getting lost with what I'm talking about, but I'm getting confused now.
It's a complex thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is complex. For me, I'm trying to really navigate through this at this stage of my life. So as you're speaking about it, I'm trying not to get caught in my physical body. But what you're saying is feeling the embodiment of the energy of that, the source of it.
You know, the simplest way I'd say to look at how all parts can work together, which also takes you out of that Newtonian model where you're like trying to just sum what is and you can't perceive anything beyond it, to seeking how actually there's much more to our awareness that can be appreciated if you start to find the value in all aspects of the physical and non-physical experience. So within that too has to be an appreciation of even the physicality and the opportunity to feel all this movement and to learn to not dissociate from it, to create a feeling of inner peace. And that's how I believe the bliss state is really born from that. You first have to embody a larger than just your body awareness about your true field, to start to feel like your consciousness is with you at all times, but it's not a local sensation. It's not just what's arising from the brain. It's not this scientific, deterministic kind of consciousness, which is built on just predictive programming, which keeps a lot of people in a very victimized state because they believe their past yields their current perception. And so if there is deep trauma there, they're fixated on it and they have no idea how to transcend what the nervous system is holding, all the deep pain and resistance. And so they want to just kind of evolve outside of the vessel because there's that notion that you have to leave the vessel behind and everything that it's holding to feel that transcendence. But then what if that too is the illusion, right? What if there's a different way to relate to the body and to start to feel like this entire physicality is connected to a new quantum perspective, and maybe even a new timeline in which you achieved this heightened relationship to the self? The body is highly regenerative from an energetic and a physical standpoint. So as soon as you allow yourself to access this new feeling inside you, the body starts to feel different. And you can even start to tap into whole new features of the physiology and the psyche that allow you to tap into those higher states of consciousness. And it's kind of like quantum states in physics. There's even a really interesting new branching of physics, relatively new. It's called cubism. Have you ever heard of it before? Or quantum Bayesianism?
No.
It's an unbelievable, really powerful perspective on how you can live in a participatory universe by starting to connect all these dots within the self. And it kind of started with this physicist, John Wheeler, who was literally drafting up this model of the participatory universe where the observer is intimately connected with reality, and the measurement of a system is what causes the evolution of that system, but not in any one direction, meaning that the past doesn't just create the future and that's it. The future can also create the past or the present. And that's where things get very trippy and where a lot of people struggle to even understand the implications of that on their current reality. But in this world of cubism, what that implies is it's not just observation that creates reality, it's also how you choose to be connected to the realm of possibilities and the quantum sea of information that yields how you feel about reality. And that feeling, which will then create a belief system and a way in which you interact with the entire field of information, is what actually yields what possibility you experience. Meaning that it's more about how you allow yourself to experience reality, that reality will be experienced. Which is why the feminine heart of that is key if you're looking to experience really an integrative worldview, not one that's full of splits or a need to dissociate from the body or engage in any kind of dissociation, even if subtle. Because there is, let's say, a certain possibility in the entire realm of those possibilities for every individual in which you can feel all of this and not be disappointed by it, in which you can understand even trauma and pain and those past versions of self can build into this really integrative perspective and a feeling that allows you to get closer to, let's say, what source consciousness is experiencing. That's like an amalgamation of all the perspectives that actually yields more coherence and more love and more truth. So you have to seek to kind of connect all those dots and feel how that allows you to become even more vital in awareness. And it's kind of like steps, even though it's not a hierarchical relationship at all. But the higher you go, the more you're achieving more vantage points that allows you to feel greater coherence and connection to what is. And to me, that's the essence of spiritual immunity, not needing to disconnect from anything because ultimately it's all about your relationship to it. So even if you feel that there are inconsistencies, and of course, the more that you hold as these energetic perspectives within you, the more you can feel where, let's say, people aren't in integrity, or you feel some opportunity that to your mind sounds good, but to your heart feels off. You can actually trust that a part of you that's registering the deeper knowing can be indeed trusted, because you can even say it's connected to your future self or to that potential in the quantum universe that knows that's what's really in store for you if you follow the heart. And so you can literally choose a timeline of that deeper alignment that involves less mistakes, less needing to regress into the past and learn the hard way, because you're actually learning that deep gift of embodiment by trusting everything that's come from that inner wisdom.
That sounds so much easier and more congruent with me. I feel more whole because it's always like, I think the more research we do, the more reading we have, because obviously everyone has their own ideas and perceptions about what reality is, what is quantum physics, what is spirituality. And so I feel like and that goes back to what you were saying, that inner wisdom and knowing resides within ourselves. You don't have to seek external of it because, I mean, it's just like, even like reading the Bible, I pick it up every now and then and I just think, well, that was written by how many people and by their perception of their stories. And then when you're reading it, then you're having your perception about what you're reading, whether that's, sometimes you go, what does that mean to me? But then that's then asking me, what does it mean to be dependent on my experience and what's going on with my level of consciousness as well. And you speak a lot about consciousness. I'd love to make it more simplified because consciousness is such a big topic. And what does it exactly mean? So I'd love to maybe get a bit more insight into consciousness.
Mm-hmm. So the most simple definition I can give is that it's the ground of all being. And it's both the sea of awareness. At the same time, it's the sea of internal awareness. It's awareness itself. It's the substrate of our experience that we feel when we're connected to this wave-like potential within our fields. So that involves how you are feeling reality, your awareness of yourself, and both conceptually and in a more embodied way, how you're able to communicate with the field. And so the field of consciousness is what's actively pulsating around us. It's the vibrational basis of reality. And it's also something that's somewhat musical, if you feel into it, because it holds this entire spectrum of information that's light information, that's vibrational information, that's what you can hear and see and feel, but it's also that kind of psi phenomena information, the information you can pick up on when you're intuitively picking up on everything in the environment that you're able to non-locally access. And so the deeper experiments in consciousness and coherence, they almost always involve picking up on information beyond the standard conception of time and space, needing to, let's say, know something in order to feel it. But it explains phenomena like remote viewing and psychic phenomena and quantum or remote healing, which allows you to transmit signals through time and space in a way that mainstream science can't even wrap their heads around, because it doesn't really explain how those particles of information and scalar energy even can transport this vital information at a distance, because the nature of it is that it's all encoded in the field. Every single part of this quantum system or holographic universe even contains the whole of it, which means that every part of you, the self, and awareness is actually experiencing that oneness within itself, which goes to show that if we're not able to really tap into the vastness of the potential of our awareness, we're limited in some ways. And it's those biases, like you mentioned, from various texts, from religious indoctrination, from any of the institutionalized versions of anything really in the world, that's trapping people in a perception of that limitation, which I feel is actually the deepest problem of all, that people are connected to a concept of what it means to be human or to embody. And what they think they have access to is usually something extremely limited, because if people would really tap into the essence of consciousness and what they can experience, including things like instantaneous healing and movement in a way where you're picking up on information from the future, from the past, being able to perceive things beyond even what your mind can possibly comprehend, you would start to achieve that knowing of what will allow you to feel a breakthrough. And that's a massive phenomena. Imagine collectively if everybody would go through a quantum shift like that to awaken to their true inner gnosis and to start to live and act in that way. I think, first of all, there would be like a kind of a violent uprising against all of that's kept people enslaved mentally. And that's probably why all these systems in place are preventing that subtly, by keeping people indoctrinated and silenced, because they don't actually know, they don't need the system to know their own divinity. And to tap into the sacred essence, you have to, at some point, disentangle from all of the mental constructs and just put to the test, what can you achieve and really allow yourself to experience if you're no longer in bondage to anything that's creating belief about the energy that lives within the self. That energy can't be constrained, but it can be consciously used to create beautiful things, like contributions to humanity, things of a beautiful impact, healing. And I think a lot of people would have access to kind of superhuman abilities if only they would confide more in what is trying to come through them, especially as wisdom and even healing abilities that don't need any physical experience to awaken those things, because what's needed most is that energetic quality of coherence. So that's the ultimate practice, generating coherence within the field through a combination of different tools that allow you to slow down and to feel yourself more, and to awaken all the different dimensions of what you're sensing, feeling, and what's seeking to come through you to ultimately live a life of intentionality and deeper values. So there's a lot more we could talk about with consciousness. You're right. It's like it's the vastest topic of all, but it's hopefully this is opening the door for curiosity for people listening to this.
Oh, absolutely. Because for me, I'm just thinking, like, how do you do it, Gabby? Because I know for me, like, I'm a massive empath, and you were talking about the feminine energy, which is the receptive. And so, as a receptive energy, there's so much fear in the world, right? So, how do you? Because I know that sometimes I'll be going, that's not even my thought. Where did that come from? And I'll just, just lovingly let it go and not entertain it. But how do you do that? Because obviously you're very intuitive, perceptive in what you do. How do you navigate through this, well, let's call it chaos, this chaos is currently, that we're all experiencing, really?
Mm-hmm. So imagine we're literally in a sea. Like I mentioned a few times, a sea of awareness, or sea of information. But literally, imagine we're all like in one big ocean of awareness, and we can feel all of us are particles. Typically, we're fixed in our nature. So everyone's doing their own thing, but entangled in this web of awareness, where there's actually a fluid substrate behind all of those particles and everything else in physical existence. So to communicate with any other particle in the sea, you need to first of all bring it into your awareness. You can feel that as a seemingly separate aspect, but really it's entangled with you because we're all part of the same sea, right? And so that's something that you can empathize with only if you connect with it in this way of understanding. There's a fundamental sameness behind that, sort of like a fractal, a self-similar pattern, right? And so there's something similar that you can pick up on energetically about another being or another source of information. You can start to feel it more on that energetic plane. And from there, you can derive a lot of information, especially as an empath. Typically, empaths, I feel, are those people that they lack that kind of egoic resistance that would cause them to feel defensive or protective over only their own interests, their own conditioning, or their own way of seeing the world. And so they're able to let in other perspectives. They're able to naturally feel the pulsation around them in the field. And often that means there's a heightened field awareness. They're super sensitive. The nervous system picks up on tons of information, which, like you said, can be a dangerous thing because if you pick up on too much, you're going to feel like you want to explode or you're burnt out by the sheer amount that you're picking up on. So it's important to feel like you can also go into different states of being, different modes of awareness. You can be like a particle, meaning you can maintain your sovereignty and your autonomy, and you can know how to create definition around yourself, which is actually a very healthy concept, especially if you're doing spiritual, healing, empathic type work, communicating with lots of people in fields. You have to know how to station yourself and create an experience where you're entangling with the other, but you also remember to be rooted to your own frequency. And even more, to not change the internal frequency, regardless of who you're entangling with. And that might seem like a contradiction because to empathize is to take somebody else's field into yourself and be able to relate with it. But even in my own work, I'm always feeling like I'm kind of rooted in this position, let's say, of like an antenna. Like I'm picking up on their information, the others. I can feel even their emotions in my body often. But when that experience is over, when there's, the tangled hierarchy in that moment comes to an end, I'm able to step out of that space and to immediately feel my own field is resolute. Because what was created before those interactions is a deeper commitment to myself and to my energetic integrity. That's something that a lot of empaths don't do. And I try to teach as many as I can to remember that the field is like its own geometry. It's a geometry of consciousness. And if your field is constantly wide open, and if you feel super vulnerable to energetic attacks, even psychic attacks, to people leeching on you, to vampiric sort of energetic connections, all these things are real, but they only exist because people's fields are super permeable in both directions, and they lack that energetic autonomy. They don't set a deep enough standard of self-love to actually seal their field and to intentionally know what's coming in and out of it. So the beautiful thing is that you can be an empath, you can be super compassionate and a giver, but have this sort of, I call it a semi-permeable field, like a membrane, a cell membrane, where it's giving and it's also receiving. However, it knows how to preserve what's inside of its own field, which means you're able to still pick up on all this information from others, but be grounded at the same time. And usually that feels really good to people because an empath that's not protecting their field, they can feel super disembodied. They might not even know how to hold space for another person, or that person might not feel like they're interacting with a vessel that's holding wisdom that they can also draw on to learn to protect themselves and to level up in some ways. So I feel that's a crucial step that can't be overlooked. If you're an empath, you have to mostly empathize with yourself to develop that core and to know what your equilibrium feels like, which means typically a hypersensitive person needs to spend a lot of time alone and doing the things that allow them to feel this deep connection to their emotions, their heart, their nervous system, to rest enough, to meditate, or to do whatever it takes to feel like you are coming back to your set point. And only from there can you really do work that uplifts other people. Because that's that concept I just briefly mentioned, is this tangled hierarchy. What that means is that you can entangle with somebody else, and it's through your deep connection to yourself and your own state of healing that you're able to bring somebody up. Think about it. We can't really heal somebody unless we are deeply, in a resolute way, connected to all those parts of ourselves. Otherwise, they can only attain whatever level of coherence we're showing them, which if it's coming from a disembodied individual, it's not going to be lasting. And what's going to come through is a kind of partial healing or advice coming from the brain that isn't going to allow for that deeper connection. So that's a really deep thing for empaths to think about. It has to come through you first, being in that balance, and also doing what it takes to create energetic integrity.
I love that. And I'm a visual person. So just the fact you talked about membrane, but that I'm very used to be like that. I remember every time I ran a facilitator class, I used to get sick physically for a couple of days. And a
Wow.
healer said to me, you've got to learn to cut ties that bind. And he was talking about the entanglement with other people that you collaborate with or you connect with. Even though you finish your class, they might go home and speak to their partners about what took place, which is pulling or drawing from you, which is why
Yeah.
you're feeling drained and sick all the time. So it's very much resonating with what you were speaking about. So I'll just have to visualize I've got a membrane every time I'm doing those classes. Gabby, I'm also very, very conscious of your time. I would love to go to our 3 shiny gold nuggets, but before I do that, is there anything any question I have not asked you that maybe some information you wanted to share? And I did really want to also that you obviously run classes and groups as well for yourself. So maybe talk a little bit about what you offer, because I'm sure people are going to watch this. Just I could sit here and listen to you talk for 4 or 5 hours, and I'm sure everyone's going to feel the same. So how can they continue to work with you once they connect with you? And then we can go into our 3 shiny gold nuggets.
Sure. Well, thank you for saying that. I'm glad I could bring something of resonance to people. I share a lot online. I share regularly. Once I stopped just writing, I felt the calling. That was what the energy pushed through me to start an Instagram page. And I've been doing it for quite a few years now. So I post almost daily on Instagram, lots of different shiny gold nuggets, as you say, and weekly on YouTube. So I post a lot of content there, and I do one-on-one sessions, and I have a little community that I run. I do some Q&A sessions in there, and I also have a course for women who want to understand the journey, the kind of multidimensional feminine healing and integration. So it's a course that I offer. And my book, Falling Up, is kind of a guided pathway to understanding how all these different stages are things you can self reflect on and really feel the universe inside you that you can cater to more deeply through this conscious, loving energy. So, yeah, there's a little bit
I
there.
I love it, and I love your title, "Falling Up." It just to me, it's really what we've been talking about. It's really about expanding, falling up rather than falling down. So I love that. So thank you. So we'll have all of those in the show notes. So let's go to your 3 shiny golden nuggets that you would like to leave for our audience today.
Yeah. So let's start with when I said the feminine part, we talked quite a bit about it. But I would say it's a really good starting point for people to start to feel the feminine energy inside them and to connect with it in a way where they feel physically there's a shift in their entire field. Usually that feels like the awareness, it moves totally inward. And that's not just a metaphorical thing. The feminine energy is literally like that gravitational force, like the quantum vacuum. It brings energy inward into the cosmic womb, into the physical womb. And you can feel it even in a woman's womb or the heart chakra in a man, which is also like that internal womb space from which all this energy comes through. And to start to get acquainted with what it feels like to be drawn into your own womb space and to feel the comfort and the peace in that. And to feel also what wants to arise from that place within the self where you start to feel so much more. It might feel like there's a lot of experiences there. It could be chaotic, sort of like a combustion point, like you mentioned. But if that's the experience, that's okay. Or it could be very still. There could be an experience, and a lot of women, especially I know, experience this deep numbness, and it can feel a little bit unsettling. If you've been disconnected, if you're one of those empaths that's highly sensitive but divorced from self-empathy, you can feel like when you try to feel that, there's nothingness. It's kind of a still energy. So you need to just allow yourself to be with that, be very present and deeply committed to feeling again the internal safety and that support structure for the inner feminine basis. And then from there, you're going to feel a lot more sensations which can come through. So my second kind of gold nugget here would be to breathe into that state. When you cultivate an internal place of presence, to allow your breathing to slow down naturally, which often does happen, by the way, without even thinking about it. Obviously, when we become deeply present and intentional, we move into a place where we're kind of super conscious. You're not as connected to the mind. You're not thinking about what's happening. You're just observing. And at that point, your awareness is just allowing you to flow through the entirety of your field. And slowing down the breath at that point can allow you to access a lot more information. It's like physically what allows you to retrieve what's been in between the notes in between the words that have been coming to mind, and to retrieve all this information that allows you to connect with it more naturally going forward. So, and that's something I recommend going forward for people to do these conscious breath holds and to just slow down their breath as much as possible, because that allows you to stay in that lower, deeper brainwave pattern where you can literally retrieve more intuition and connection to your field and other fields in reality at large. And then from there, also to engage in conscious goal setting or intention setting. That would be my third recommendation, especially with the fire horse year. This is the time to start setting. If people haven't done their New Year's resolutions yet, if they're not playing into the Gregorian calendar spell, it's quite all right. You can start now, and you can continue to set those intentions all throughout the year, all throughout your journey, by feeling what is coming through this portal inside your own biofield. And that's information that can circulate and pulsate and even surprise you time after time, because you are always connecting to more. And that's how the field continues to expand. I feel there's an innate tendency, like you said, to keep shifting states, to allow yourself to transform archetypally, spiritually, intellectually, all the time, almost like you're going through a software upgrade on a system, maybe even daily, if you're somebody that feels very open to that kind of process of transformation. So to feel from that place what now wants to come through you that will allow you to experience more joy, vitality, and alignment consistently between the body, the emotional field, the mental field, and the spiritual field. Or maybe even to take it to the point of what would your higher self want you to be pursuing to create this ultimate alignment. And if there's a definite answer that the mind is trying to oppose, I think that's even greater information about what splits need to be reconciled to allow there to be the restoration of that unity between the soul and the ego, which is always learning to catch up. So hopefully that provides a kind of launch pad for people that are in the in-between place. There's so much good stuff to do just by feeling yourself and being deeply invested in your own inner to outer transformation.
That was perfect. I feel like a lot of us are in that in between stage. And, you know, I can say that the wisdom that's coming through you, Gabi, is so amazing, because I think there's this knowing. You speak it so eloquently. There's this real understanding and knowing. And I am sitting here still trying to absorb the meaning of it all, which is amazing. So you're extraordinary, can I just say? Absolutely extraordinary. So thank you so very much for coming on the show. Thank you again for sharing your wealth of wisdom, your time, your energy. You're super amazing. And I know lots of people are going to reach out to you. So thank you for what you do. You're an amazing human being.
My pleasure. I really appreciate you saying that. And I'll just say one other thing about the amount of information that comes through. You know, it's not really about even trying to comprehend all of the information, because I know some of this stuff I mentioned, like the cubism, the quantum physics stuff, it's going to be over people's heads if they haven't heard these concepts before. But it's the feeling that is encoded in the information that matters the most. It's all about the energy. And so that's a simpler basis. That's the start. Even if you don't fully understand yourself or the nature of the experience, it's also learning to love the mystery of it that I feel is so captivating and allows you to respect life and the self and be committed to that expansion. Because if you're inviting in through more curiosity, this hunger for the deeper questions and answers that also come from within the self, it starts to unfold itself through you, sort of like the blossoming of an internal lotus. And everyone has the potential to tap into that, but viscerally, first and foremost. So I'm glad I could help people remember, you know, that they're all the lotus. It's not any of us that have more access to it, but we need to trust ourselves to allow for that unfolding. So that's kind of my wish for everybody listening.
But can I just say, even from my own experience, I feel like you're speaking to my soul. I feel like there's a remembrance that's taking place. My heart was doing weird stuff as well, this opening that you're talking about. So I think that you're speaking with such depth that you're activating something within other humans that I think is what's creating the opening that you're speaking about, the awakening, the alignment. It's magical. Magical.
Thank you. I'm glad you felt it. That's why I said it's all about the feeling. It's like a toroidal field. You have to feel the information, let it in and through you, and then we become activating nodes. That's like if I added one thing that's the cherry on top of the whole conversation. All of us are activating nodes in this collective grid. We all need to remember that this is part of our vital purpose, to remember that And to know that that's the sacred devotion to also the oneness of it all. To know that our own awakening is inevitably going to lead to others' awakening. And that's a huge motivating factor. For anyone that's in the in-between place, usually they've forgotten actually the vital purpose of being human, being here, not just to learn things, not just to try to graduate from the earth school as quickly as possible, but to actually seek to make an impact and to know that our energy can do such amazing things to help other humans in different ways, and to also enjoy life as much as possible, not to try to get out of this place as quickly as possible, as that's often something people are trying to do, to just get out of the karmic aspect of it. Can we also make this an organic, living, breathing, beautiful experience that allows us to enjoy our own physicality and metaphysicality at the end of the day? So that would be my final touch for anyone that's feeling like they're in between the states, but really wanting to remember that this is something to savor and to make the most of.
That was a beautiful cherry on the top, Gabby. Thank you so very much. Thank
Thanks. I'm
you
glad
once
you liked it.
again for coming on the show. You're amazing. I'd love to get you to come back on the show. I'm sure people are going to be screaming out at you. So thank you once again. And we'll have all your details about the feminine leadership program that you've got available as well. Yeah, thank you so very much for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.